Susan, I have to ask you a question here, because introverts and the concept of teams and Zoom cultures where if there's just 5 seconds of silence, the first comment you receive is you are mute. And introverts, I presume, are reflecting and thinking and pausing, which is part of their tools of conveying and collecting their thoughts. How do you develop a workplace which at all is catering for this type of personas?
This is probably the biggest question that I hear from one company after another after another. It's a perennial problem. There was a statistic that came out of the Kellogg School some years ago that in your typical large meeting, you have 3 people doing 70% of the talking, which is such a huge problem, not just for the introverts, but everybody who just depends on having good ideas out there and not having bad ideas necessarily dominate. So what do we do about it? There's a number of techniques that people can use to really turn this around. And one is just the simple practice of the person running the meeting, kind of noticing who is talking and maybe just going around the room so that everybody hasn't, or around the Zoom call, so that everybody is equally invited to speak. I also love the system of brain writing, where if you have a problem that you're collectively contemplating, everybody writes down their idea, whether on a Post-it if you're in person or on the Zoom. And then the facilitator takes all those ideas and then you contemplate them. And so now you've just like bypassed the whole jockeying for position based on who is more comfortable talking first. But there are also things that introverts can do. And one really simple practice is to, if you know that you're somebody who has a lot to offer, but you tend to be more reserved, you can have a kind of quota system with yourself where you decide, okay, on this Zoom call, I'm going to speak twice. And you might prepare in advance what you're going to say and just make sure that you do it, even if it's not super comfortable for you. And then you're making that deal with yourself. So once you've met your quota, now you can kind of be a little quieter and not feel guilty about it. And you do that, and little by little by little, you actually become more comfortable. And so you don't even need the scaffolding of the quota system later on.
Thank you for your advice. I know I think a lot of us will find that beneficial. Okay, coming up, she quit her job and began her career as a writer with just 1 day's warning. Will she, and that's Suzanne, recommend everyone else to do the same? I think the answer will surprise you. And I have to ask you straight away now, Suzanne, with that question. Would you recommend other people to do it? Is it really worth it?
Oh, there's so much to say about this. Okay. First of all, I have to say, in all honesty, and I think it's important for other people who are thinking about this, I had a gigantic, you could call it a kick in the pants, let's say, because I was a corporate lawyer. I was on partner track, and there came a day when a senior partner in my firm came to me and said, "We're not putting you up for partner." And I didn't really know, did that mean this year or ever? But and I experienced it at the time as a terrible failure. To Oliver's point, it really was one of those catastrophic moments. But it was also a get out of jail free card for me. And I left the firm like 3 hours later. And I expected that I was going to kind of go around the world and travel and just, take it easy for a while. But what I found was that I started writing, which is what I'd wanted to do since I was 4 years old. But here's the key thing to answer your question. Even once I started writing, I never in a million years thought I was ever going to be able to make a living at it. And so I started like a little freelance business teaching negotiation skills just so I could pay my rent. And was just writing as my beloved hobby kind of on the side. And I believe that is actually the key to creativity, like that we have this narrative that we like, especially in the US, that, if you have your dream, you should chase the dream, you should take the big risk, don't worry about if it doesn't work. If you care enough about your dream, you're going to take those risks. And I think that's a disaster for creative work. I think we're much better off creatively when we're not worrying about paying the rent, when we have a solid plan B in place, and you can just go and enjoy the creativity itself. It's much more likely to actually pay off in the end.
Well, I tell you, the comment you gave right now will fit a lot of people out there. And it actually leads me to the BCG Minute, which, Marshall, can you just introduce today's BCG Minute contributor?
Yes, our contributor today is a wonderful friend of mine, a person who's dramatically influenced my life, Dr. Jim Kim, fairly quickly as a simultaneous MD and PhD in anthropology from Harvard. And if you know anything about getting a PhD in anthropology and an MD at the same time, not so easy. He's an incredibly brilliant guy. I'm so proud of him. He led Partners in Health, and his work and the work of Paul Farmer, just another great person, literally saved tens of millions of lives. So I love Dr. Jim. He then went over to Dartmouth, where I met him, was president of Dartmouth College. And then after he left Dartmouth, he became president of the World Bank. He was there for 7 years. Now he's Global Investment Partners, and he's just an A+ wonderful human being. And, I'm just going to go back to a comment that Susan made. He's a role model of how to do this. And anyway, tell us about the question. And then I want to get people's responses.
Well, let's run the BCG Minute.
Very happy to be able to ask a question. I'm a huge fan of the M&M Show and of both Martin and Marshall. So for the guests, I have really two questions. I myself have reinvented my career at last count about 7 times. My question for you is, how did you know it was the right time to move? And then when you knew it, how did you find the courage to make that jump?
What a fantastic question. I mean, Oliver, what's your view about this?
Wow. I'm just thinking about where and when this is applied in my own life, because I'm sure this is the case for many people. When I look back at the career changes that I've made and the decisions that I've taken, it's always been for me, in my case, it's always been in the service of getting to do the kind of writing that I want to do. I've had a very sort of one-track mind in that respect. So I've sometimes sort of walked away from things that seemed like great opportunities, or stopped doing things that might have made sense to carry on doing to other people just because of that navigational principle. But it never felt like that in the moment. I was really influenced. I have been really influenced by the work of a Jungian psychotherapist called James Hollis, whose writing is marvelous. But one of the things that he suggests is, as a way of sort of asking about yourself, about choices and life paths like this, is to ask yourself whether the path that you're contemplating or the path that you're currently on is one that enlarges you or diminishes you. As kind of a form of words, it's as an alternative, to asking, will this make me happy? Because as we all know, this is a disastrous question that we're all terrible at answering as human beings. We get it wrong all the time, predicting what will make us happy. And I have just had that feeling at certain moments in my career, I suppose, that, something might be comfortable, it might be fun in a way, it might be paying the bills, but it was no longer a way to grow. And on the flip side of that, something can be kind of unpleasant in certain ways, difficult and not enjoyable in the moment, but you can still be fairly confident that it is a path of enlargement. The most obvious thing, recently, I'll just finish quickly, but when I stopped writing the Guardian column that I'd been writing for well over a decade, it was mainly because I was aware that, I would love to get the next thing lined up first and not stop doing this until I could make a nice little transition to the next perch. But it became very obvious to me, and it's always been obvious to me in other contexts too, that it just never happens that way, that I would have to actually create some stakes and, stop doing one thing in order that the next thing would happen and take shape.